All right. Thank you all for logging into today's event and for joining us to learn how earned media influences consumer behavior. One of the biggest challenges for communications professionals is understanding this relationship in order to optimize media strategy and ultimately demonstrate tangible business value. And that's why Onclusive invented and trademarked PR Attribution. It's to connect earned and owned media content to behavioral outcomes, specifically website visits and website actions that result in more customers, more sales, and more brand loyalists. We recently analyzed our PR attribution data from over 100,000 media articles. And today, we're very excited to share both our research results, some of which are totally unexpected, and our recommendations on using this data for your communications strategies. This webinar will be recorded and shared with all the registrants as well. But first, I'd like to introduce our special guests today. So please welcome Frank Mulhern. He is a best-selling author. He's the Executive Director of Academic Programs and Associate Dean of Research at the Medill School of Journalism, Media, and Integrated Marketing Communications at Northwestern University. Frank specializes in research on the economics of marketing, the impact of new media technologies on marketing communications, and the measurement of advertising and promotion effects. His research has appeared in numerous scholarly journals, including the Journal of Marketing, the Journal of Marketing and Communications, the Journal of Retailing, the Journal of Advertising, the International Journal of Research in Marketing, the Journal of Interactive Marketing, and the Journal of Business Research. Frank is also the co-author of the textbook Marketing Communications, Integrated Theory, Strategy, and Tactics. And in addition, Frank conducts executive education and speaks at corporations and universities in the US, Europe, and Asia. Welcome, Frank. And I'm also joined by Danielle Bosch, who is a media analyst here at Onclusive. And Danielle began her journey here at Onclusive actually as an intern and later joined the team as a research associate part-time while finishing her education. And so congratulations to Danielle, who recently graduated from the University of Rochester, where she received her master's of marketing analytics. And she specializes in insights, data analytics, and market research. And Danielle actually was the individual responsible for the majority of the statistical work behind today's research findings. So welcome, Danielle. And I'm Sean O'Neill. I'm the general manager of the North American group here at Onclusive. And for those of you who don't yet know Onclusive, we combine industry-leading data science from our Silicon Valley engineering team with an international consultancy and award-winning media relations tools to help you manage, monitor, and measure your communications activity. And we are the inventors of performance standards like Power of Voice and, of course, PR Attribution, which is the first and only technology to connect PR efforts to revenue. So here's what we'll cover today. Since our research was conducted using Onclusive's trademarked PR attribution data, we'll start by briefly explaining what PR attribution is and how it works to reliably measure specific behavioral outcomes. And then we'll describe the research methodology we used for this quantitative analysis. And we'll spend most of our time today actually exploring the relationship between core media attributes and the consumer behavior to really understand the ways that these attributes, including publication authority, reach, article relevance, brand sentiment, reader engagement, how these attributes are key to driving actions from your audience. And throughout the webinar, we'll also hear Frank's thoughts on our research. He'll provide recommendations on how to use these insights to improve your communications performance. We'll end with Q&A, so please submit your questions throughout the presentation by using the Zoom Q&A feature, and we'll address them at the end during the Q&A section. Okay, so let's first establish what PR attribution even is. So Onclusive invented it to determine how many times people, after having read an article about your brand, eventually visit your website and which actions they take. For example, viewing a specific page, downloading content, signing up for a demo, or purchasing a product or a service. Thanks to our proprietary news crawler and advanced marketing technology, Onclusive can make this connection, and we can do it whether or not the article contains a link back to your website, which is part of the magic. So how are we able to do this? Well, the PR attribution methodology combines both direct and indirect deterministic signals with the world's most sophisticated machine learning and statistical models for earned media attribution. Our algorithms have been trained with over a decade of historical tracking data, having analyzed billions of media articles and millions of website visits and transactions. So no other technology connects earned and owned media content to brand website activity with the same precision and accuracy. So Frank, I'd like to hear from you early on here. As a marketing and communications research expert, how do you measure the impact of communications?
So thank you, Sean. So the field of marketing communications and public relations is in dramatic transformation because of the digital revolution. The creation and distribution of content is way ahead of the measurement of the impact of that content on the marketplace and on consumers. This particular approach, this PR attribution model, represents bringing together data and analytics in a way, and we'll see more about the methodology in a few minutes here, that combines these direct and indirect effects in a way that allows for measurement of outcomes that really has not been possible in the industry so far.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more about the methodology here. So the purpose of this study was to understand the relationship between certain characteristics of media articles, the relationship between those characteristics and PR-driven website traffic and actions measured by PR attribution. Essentially, we wanted to understand how predictive are the following characteristics of an individual article driving website traffic and website actions. Publication authority, including its reputation and its reach. The article relevance towards the brand, including the presence of the brand name in the headline. Brand engagement, including the volume of social media amplification and the presence of a backlink. And of course, article sentiment towards the brand. So these are the attributes that we analyzed. Now we want to hear from you before we go into the results. So we're going to pop up a poll here. So please answer the poll. It's a multiple choice poll. You can only select one answer because we want to force rank your answers. And then later in the webinar, we will share the results with everyone. So here's the poll question. Which of these earned media attributes do you think most influences website activity? So please take a moment. Again, you can only select one because we're looking for the attribute of a media article that you think is the most influential on whether or not the reader of that article will visit your website and take actions on your website. Okay. We'll come back to the poll results momentarily. Okay, now we would like to now take a closer look at the methodology itself, okay, before we dive into the results. And so I'm going to actually ask Danielle to briefly share our methodology so that you can better understand what really went into this study.
Of course, happy to do that, Sean. We analyzed 117,473 media articles published between January 1st and December 31st, 2021, about a representative sample of B2B and B2C companies across a broad set of industries. The articles in the study included only earned media content, so no owned or social media, published via digital media, so no print or broadcast coverage. Jointly with the rest of Onclusive data science team, we conducted a statistical analysis which demonstrates how characteristics of different aspects of a research study or media attributes are related to specific outcomes like website traffic and consumer actions. Given the large sample size combined with the variance of article volume per company included in the analysis, we use averages to make the correlative inferences.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. Appreciate the overview. And I think this is actually a good time to take a look at the results of our earlier poll. Thanks for everyone who participated. Okay, let's take a look at the results here. I believe everyone can see the poll results. Hopefully those are being published here. Let me close that out and share the results. Okay. So just at first glance, some interesting results here to me. Interesting to see that the publication reach was so low on the list. Actually, according to the audience, you believe that the reach of a publication is actually minimally, if at all, predictive of whether or not the article will drive website traffic. Whereas you feel that things like the relevance of the article towards the brand, as well as the presence of a backlink, are maybe the most predictive. And also interesting to see that the sentiment of the article didn't score too high here from the audience. So, you know, we'll dig in here, and we're actually going to go through each of the individual correlations momentarily. And I think the audience is certainly, I think, on the right track with a few of these, and I think you will probably be surprised as well, based off of some of the findings here. So, so with that, let's jump right in. I'm very excited to share our fascinating insights with you. And again, spoiler alert, some of them are completely counterintuitive. And even myself, Danielle, and our data science team here at Onclusive could not have guessed what we found and what we're going to be sharing with you today. Okay, let's start looking at the data. We'll begin with publication reputation, which is defined as the overall authority of a media publication based on its quote unquote tier. Okay, so a high reputation publication would be considered a tier 1 outlet, and a low publication reputation publication would be considered a tier 3 outlet. Okay, so I think it's fairly intuitive, but examples of a high reputation publication, you know, these are the widely known trusted outlets such as the New York Times, the USA Today, Forbes, CNBC, while the low reputation publications include the thousands and thousands of niche content sites and blogs, right? And medium publication reputation represents everything in between. Okay, so Danielle, these findings were somewhat surprising. Tell us what the data says.
Yeah, this was very interesting. We found that publication reputation is only minimally predictive of website traffic, with high and medium reputation publications driving roughly equal website traffic. However, website visits from high reputation publications tend to drive significantly more website actions, 41.23%, more than medium reputation, and 73.17% more than low reputation publications. This means that website visits from high reputation publications typically convert into more actions, possibly indicating an increase in consumer trust influenced by a reputable publication.
Interesting. I probably would have expected readers of the so-called tier 1 publications to be more compelled to visit a brand's website, but it's not the case. Frank, any theories as to why, you know, in this case, tier 2 publications drive a similar website traffic volume as tier 1 publications?
Yeah, my suspicion is that the audiences that are engaged with tier 2 or even tier 3, you know, lower reputation outlets, those audiences are more highly engaged and focused and more narrow and more of a niche. The bigger, broader reputed media outlets draw large audiences, and we're going to talk about reach in a few minutes, but they have these high reputation scores based on the way reputation is measured as a composite variable. But a lot of those audiences aren't particularly engaged, and they might be more flighting. So that's my hypothesis. It's potentially researchable as a different kind of research study, but that's what this data suggests to me, is that these lower tier audiences are more focused and engaged and more specialized.
Okay, well, with that, you know, here's our recommendation. don't ignore less well-known media outlets, such as, niche content sites and blogs, because they can be powerful drivers of website traffic. In addition, to maximize the volume of actions that those readers take when they have arrived on your brand website, certainly you should build relationships with tier 1 high reputation publications and, keep them in your target media list. Frank, anything else you'd recommend here?
Yeah, I would just reiterate that and recommend that people do not overemphasize the big media outlets. That's the tendency in this profession, both from the point of view of news and public relations. And the idea is that these big media brands are the ones that get all the attention. But from what this research is showing, it's the lower tier ones that also have an effect on generating traffic. So that's meant to be more holistic, and don't fall for the trap of only emphasizing the big outlets.
Good advice. Very good advice. Okay, so related to that, let's take a look at publication reach, which also falls under the category of publication authority. And so reach is very specifically, it's the total readership or circulation of a media outlet, and therefore the potential audience size of any article. And reach is often used interchangeably with the term impressions, so it can be a little confusing, but it's not an indicator of the number of actual readers of an article. It's the potential number of readers of a single article. So Danielle, tell us about the relationship between publication reach and website activity.
So like the publication reputation, publication reach does not have a strong correlation with website traffic. There's only an 8% difference in the reach between articles that drive website traffic and those that do not. However, the publication reach of articles that drive website actions is 25.1% greater than articles that do not. Our conclusion is that while reach does not predict overall traffic, articles published on websites with large reach do tend to result in more website actions once consumers arrive at a brand website.
This is another somewhat unexpected insight that came out of the analysis, and just the fact that publication reach, meaning the total potential audience, is not a strong predictor of website traffic. For me, that was pretty counterintuitive. Although the audience guessed this one in the poll dead on. That was actually one area where the poll results were pretty consistent. But again, we wouldn't have known this definitively without the hard data collected across this tens of thousands of articles and analyzed with PR attribution. But Frank, here, any ideas why this might be the case? It does seem a bit counterintuitive.
Yeah, and again, I kind of reiterate what I said a few minutes ago, that the smaller outlets tend to have more engaged and focused and specialized audiences who are more likely to be maybe active. And I think the distinction we see here between website traffic and website actions, where there is an effect, a bigger effect for actions, kind of gets at the human behavior and the nature of how people consume media, especially digital media, and the likelihood of them to do something in response to what they happen to be reading.
Yep, good. All right, well, with that, we recommend that you consider including lower reach publications in your target media list, since outlets with lower circulation can drive meaningful website traffic. And at the same time, of course, continue to explore which publications related to your industry or your brand or your competitors also have great reach, and experiment with having your stories published there to increase the desired website actions from your audience. And then, Frank, anything else you'd add here?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent recommendation. And again, it's part of a overall earned media strategy that organizations should have. And that's a more holistic approach that looks at all kinds of outlets, not just trying to hit the big ones.
Good. Okay. So the next category we looked at is the article brand relevance. Okay, article brand relevance measures how much the article is, quote unquote, about a particular company or a brand, right? And that can range from a single mention to, let's say, a dedicated feature. And so Inclusive examines the way your brand name, competitors, key terms are mentioned in an article in terms of the frequency, the proximity, and the context. So Danielle, how predictive is an article's relevance to a brand of whether or not readers will visit and interact with that brand's website?
Relevance of the article towards the brand is only moderately correlated with website traffic. Compared to low relevance, medium relevance articles actually drive less website traffic. High relevance articles do result in the most website traffic, only moderately, 13.4% higher than low relevance articles, which points to a weak relationship between the relevance and website traffic. The unexpected finding here is that article brand relevance is not at all predictive of website actions, with low relevance articles actually driving slightly more website actions than highly relevant articles.
Now, this was a big surprise, right? The sort of negative relationship here. And it reinforces the importance of having a remarkable website experience, as I think the quality of a brand website itself is a key variable when it comes to driving desired consumer actions, right? Arguably more so than the relevance of the article itself. Frank, what do you make of this? It's certainly interesting that article relevance doesn't seem to be a strong predictor of consumer behavior.
Yeah. I think within the industry, the expectation that article relevance is a big predictor of consumer behavior is kind of an assumption or a maxim that's been believed because it appears to be commonsensical, but I don't think it's very much data supported. And this is maybe one of the most advanced analytic approaches that's been done so far to look at the impact of article brand relevance, and it's weak. It's not there. But this is a data-driven approach. And I think what we're finding as we get into this era of bigger data and analytics is some of the belief systems within the world of communications aren't necessarily true.
All right, well, the data led us to believe that your website is just as important for the success of your PR initiatives as it is for your marketing. The recommendation, of course, is make sure that your website has comprehensive and relevant content, as well as effective calls to action. And if your website ranks high in online search results, you're likely producing the right content, but A/B test your landing pages and calls to actions to help determine, which are actually the most impactful. And so great insights, Frank. Do you have anything else you'd like to recommend?
So this really gets at the idea of integration, which is what my program, Integrated Marketing Communications, which I ran for many, many years, is all about. So we're talking about, we started out talking about earned media and ways of going about measuring it, but now we're talking about the websites. We're into owned media and the need for there being a comprehensive, integrated approach to managing that content in ways that are most relevant for the audience.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, so brand headline inclusion is also part of the relevance category. And the article headline is simply the heading at the top of the article. I think everyone on the call knows that. And a brand headline inclusion means that your brand name appears in the article headline. And it's no secret to a communications professional that a good headline makes a big difference to both how a pitch is received by journalists, as well as how interested the readers will be in the content. So Danielle, tell us a little bit about this relationship.
Yeah, so the presence of the brand name in the headline is only moderately predictive of website traffic, with headline mentions resulting in 15.6% more traffic than no mentions. However, a headline inclusion is almost twice as predictive of website actions. On average, headline mentions drive 27% more actions than no headline mentions. That's
interesting. Frank, I'll turn it over to you again for your thoughts on the headline inclusion as a predictor of website actions and traffic.
Yeah, thanks. So again, this is common sense that this would happen, but the effect we're seeing is probably smaller than we would expect. I think this has gotten very complicated in the digital world because headlines, whether they're written by algorithms or by people, are written to generate clicks. And it's different from an old-fashioned print newspaper environment where a headline is written to encapsulate what the content of the story is. This has really changed the nature of headlines, and I think it confounds the impact of the name and the brand in the headline.
That is fascinating. Okay, so since an article's overall relevance to your brand is only somewhat predictive of its impact on your website traffic, the takeaway here is don't be overly focused on feature stories. You may receive as much benefit from being mentioned in an article that is highly relevant to your industry or category, even though the story is not about you. Frank, have you seen anything else interesting in your research that you'd recommend?
Only in the sense that the relevance of the particular article and the brand mentioned in the article or even the headline in the context of the bigger audience experience. What is their online news and information consumption pattern, and how do these particular outlets fit into that? And I think professionals in the field need to look at things in that way, not narrowly in terms of very specific outlets where they want to get mentions of their brands.
I think that makes sense. Okay, let's shift gears to brand engagement, starting with the presence of a backlink in the article. And we define a backlink as simply just a link to a brand's website that is embedded in a media article mentioning that brand. And you'll see here the results also, I think, consistent with the poll results. The webinar audience actually predicted this one very, very accurately. So Danielle, give us a little bit of a view here.
Yeah, so not surprisingly, the presence of a backlink is highly correlated with website traffic. On average, we see traffic increase by 86.8% when a backlink is present in an article. Now, the presence of backlink is less predictive of website actions performed by those website visitors. That said, on average, backlink presence still drives 44.9% more actions than no backlink presence.
Yeah, and I guess this one seems to be a no-brainer, right? The more methods you provide a reader to visit your website, the more visitation you'll possibly see because of the backlinks, right? It offers a convenience maybe to less motivated readers. Frank, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I put this in the category of almost a tautology. I mean, if there's a link there, some people will click it. Sometimes it's even unintentional, especially on mobile devices. If someone's reading a news story and there's a link and they really just want to scroll down, but they hit the link and it clicks through. So this is not surprising. And again, the participants in the poll ranked this one quite high. So this one is very much as expected.
Yeah. And, there's not much you can do to influence whether a published article about your brand includes a backlink or not. I think we all try. And while the data suggests you should certainly try, you should certainly request it, the presence of a backlink in your earned media content, still remains within the author and publication's control. So let's talk now about social media engagement, which represents the number of likes, shares, comments, retweets, repins, etc., that the social media interactions of a media article receives on a social network. So this, again, is literally just looking at the volume of likes, shares, and comments that the articles are receiving on social media. Okay, so Danielle, what are we seeing here?
So of all the media articles we analyzed, or of all the media characteristics we analyzed, the level of social media engagement emerged as the biggest predictor of the volume of website traffic, with highly engaged articles driving 113% more website traffic than low engaged articles. The correlation is even more pronounced when it comes to website actions, with highly engaged articles driving 280% more website actions than low engaged articles.
Okay, so although it's not a big surprise, given that social engagement is an indicator of the content's resonance with its readers, I still didn't necessarily expect this to be one of the biggest predictors of website actions. But again, hard data from our PR attribution system has proven to be full of unexpected insights. But Frank, did this surprise you at all based on your research over the years?
So no, this does not surprise me. And it's a very big effect at 280%. And what I think this is showing is there's a principle in psychology called commitment and consistency. When people take a small action that greatly increases the probability of the next action and then the next action. in personal selling. They call it the foot in the door technique. It's widely used. It was widely used in old-fashioned direct marketing and sending out letters and catalogs. It's widely used online and sending out emails and mobile notifications. And this idea of getting people along a journey, and every step on the journey they make, that increases the probability they make the next step.
So the idea here, Frank, is once we've made that choice to engage with a media article by, let's say, sharing it on social, that psychologically makes us more likely to behave, in this case, consistently with that first choice by performing additional actions like going to the company's website.
Exactly. And there's even research in neuroscience on this that has looked at the human brain and decision-making and response to information, and then actions, and then additional information and additional actions. Okay,
well, here it is in the hard data. And, look, I'll be honest, we're a bit biased on this front because, we do think it's a great strategy, but use a comprehensive media monitoring or social listening service like Onclusive to track which content your audience engages with the most on social media, and use that as a proxy, right, for what content is likely to create the most website activity for you. And, based on that, produce more content like that in order to increase both social and website interactions. Frank, anything else you'd add on this piece?
I would just want to emphasize the word comprehensive. I mean, a lot of organizations are pretty good at, tracking Twitter and tracking Facebook and, looking within these particular platforms, but really there needs to be a cross-platform, so-called omni-channel monitoring done to kind of collectively evaluate the impact of these communications.
Okay. All right, we are heading into the final insight from our research. And that is around the category of brand sentiment. And boy, were we in for a big surprise with this one. So brand sentiment is the tone and sentiment of an article towards the company or brand being mentioned. And Onclusive's brand sentiment accounts for positive, negative, or neutral tone based on our advanced artificial intelligence and semantic analysis. So drum roll here, Danielle, what is the relationship between article sentiment and website activity?
So here is the shocker. In our study, we discovered that sentiment is negatively correlated with both website traffic and website actions. The trend is actually inverted, with negative articles driving the most website traffic, neutral sentiment articles driving the second most website traffic, and positive sentiment articles driving the least website traffic. On average, positive sentiment articles drive 50.4% less traffic than negative sentiment articles, and neutral sentiment articles drive 48.7% less traffic than negative sentiment articles. Also, positive sentiment articles drive 3.4% less traffic than neutral sentiment articles. Similarly, positive sentiment articles result in 31% fewer website actions than negative sentiment articles. But positive sentiment articles do drive more, 41.4% website actions than neutral sentiment articles.
Okay, so I admit when we first finished the analysis, I did a double take, probably a triple take on this data. And I will attest that Danielle probably recut the data 5 different times and it consistently produced the same result. So we've got confidence in this, but I just want to make sure everyone's clear on this. What you're seeing here is that negative sentiment articles drive the most website traffic, and then neutral sentiment articles, the second most, and articles that are positive sentiment towards your brand drive the least amount of website traffic to your website. Is that correct, Danielle? That's really what we're seeing here?
That is what we're seeing, cut multiple ways. That is the insight.
All right, so look, one quick takeaway here is that website actions, which include not just signups and purchases, but pages viewed, are a really strong indicator of brand awareness and interest from your audience. So based on our findings, again, the quality of your website content is equally as important, both in good times and during a crisis. So how you handle the crisis and turn negative press into something positive is what makes all the difference. Okay, so Frank, what do you make of this one? Any insights from your own research?
Yeah, so in a way, this is not surprising to me because it's been quite well known in communications research that negative content generates more attention and more engagement than positive content. Our minds are predisposed towards negative. Evolutionary psychologists will talk about that's because we're risk averse and the survival instinct. In the news business, one of my friends who's a prominent journalist says, if it's not negative, it's not news. And we all see the news headlines and the news stories and the incredible amount of coverage of negative things and the minimal amount of coverage of non-negative things. So this is the way people are predisposed. So it's not surprising that when they come across a negative story in the website, they're more likely to explore it further. So that's a little difficult because then they might be landing on someone's webpage with a negative reason, looking for bad stuff. And we'll talk about the implication of that in a second. But the point being, it's a little more than there's no such thing as bad publicity. There's actually bad information, and bad that can be defined lots of different ways, and it doesn't have to be all that bad. Generates more attention and interest.
And Frank, the theory is that this is like in our DNA. You mentioned it's evolution, where we prioritize negative information because the potential costs of ignoring negative information outweigh the potential benefits of positive information. Like that's a evolutionary thing. That's why negative news drives more arousal and more engagement.
Right. And so, and way back in eons back with, prehistorical times, if someone did not see that tiger up ahead in the woods, they were in trouble. If someone did not see a bush full of berries that were edible, they still survived, as long as they found food at some point. So the point is, our brains evolved to be wary of scary things, negative things.
Fascinating. Okay. So here, as you said, Frank, while the adage that all press is good press, right? That may not necessarily be true as it relates to a brand's reputation, right? I think it's pretty intuitive that, negative press can hurt your reputation, but it does appear that negative media coverage drives more website activity. And I think as we've discussed, conceivably people are more interested in learning about companies with negative press than in those with positive press. And so overall, ensuring that you have a consistent flow of positive content on your website and a proactive way to distribute this content to the media is important. And obviously always maintaining a solid crisis management plan is a best practice, because even during a crisis, you can generate significant interest in your brand, right? As we've just demonstrated, but you can influence consumer behavior in a positive way. So I think our recommendation here is be prepared to capitalize on these events if and when they arise. So Frank, thoughts on this to wrap up the inclusive research portion of the discussion?
Yeah, so this is a field that's always fascinating me, this idea of crisis communication. And my first point is, and I've learned this from faculty members, as well as Northwestern University's former vice president of external relations, who was an alum of my program and a good friend. You have to coordinate your crisis plan with your communications plan so that the people managing the negative events or the negative communications or the negative things coming in from, whether it's the news media or the general public or the government, have to be integrated with the people who are doing strategic outbound public relations. So it has to be a coordinated effort. And secondly, when the attention is there, there's an opportunity to make something of it. And that doesn't mean lying, of course. You should never lie, but you also should never be quiet and not say anything, because then you're letting somebody else write the agenda. But this is a really fascinating area. And again, the negativity can be a bit negative or very negative. It might even be incorrect, in which case then it's an opportunity to correct it and get the right story out there. So this is a fascinating area, and I think one that people should see as potential upside.
I agree. I think there's often an opportunity here, and I guess that's our recommendation: is be prepared for it, because you might be able to capitalize on it. All right, so let's wrap things up here, folks, with a little bit of some key takeaways before we go into the Q&A. So first, connect with niche content sites, blogs, and lower reach publications to drive more quality visits to your website. Build relationships with tier 1 and other high reach outlets to increase desired website actions from your audience. And then focus on mentions in articles that are highly relevant to your industry or category as much as you do on feature stories about your brand. Make sure that your website has great content and effective calls to action, both during good times and crisis. Use comprehensive media monitoring and social listening to identify the most engaging content and produce more of it to increase both your website visitation and activity. And generate a consistent flow of positive earned media content while maintaining a solid crisis management plan to respond to negative articles. Okay, now we're going to open it up for questions from our audience. If you haven't already, please submit your questions by using the Zoom Q&A feature. So pop it right into that Q&A. And we've got a few really good questions already here. And the first couple questions are actually a little bit more methodological. And I think important points to confirm here. So the first question was, how do you define earned media? I think that's a good fundamental question, since this whole study is about the relationship between earned media and consumer behavior. So earned media is, and I'll give you my quick definition and I'll let Frank expound on this, is intended to relate to any media content that is created by a third party. In this case, the classic earned media examples would be a news article or a press, piece of press coverage. Those third parties can be journalists, right? They could be reporters. They could also be bloggers. They could also be influencers. So today it's a pretty broad spectrum of what could constitute earned media, but it's sort of the mentions of your brand that you didn't pay for, effectively, is probably one way to think about it. Frank, what else would you say here definitionally?
Yeah, just to quickly, I mean, there's paid, owned, and earned media. Paid is advertising, like going out and buying commercial communications. Owned is our website, our mobile app, our brochures, anything that we produce, which, by the way, is a booming field now in the digital world. And then earned is third party. That used to mean news coverage. It still means news coverage, but now there's bloggers, now there's social media influencers, there's all kinds of additional third parties out there. But that's what earned is. And earned, of the three, it's the least controllable, which is what makes it so challenging. In advertising, advertisers control everything. The agency controls everything about the brand placement and the timing and the content. In owned media, we control that too. We control our website, we control our app, we control our written documentation. Earned is very different and very uncontrollable. And it's also why the PR profession within the world of communications does the best at managing social media, because they're used to dealing with uncontrolled third parties.
Great explanation. And not only is it the thing we don't control, there is significant data suggesting that earned media is also the most influential form of media and the most trusted form of media, which is, of course, what most of the attendees of the webinar spend most of their days doing, which is generating that earned media content. There's a very famous study that Nielsen, who's basically in the paid media business, ironically, has conducted numerous times. It's called the Nielsen Trust in Advertising Study. And every time they run the study, earned forms of media are at the very, very top of the list of media formats that are most trusted by consumers. And it's pretty simple, right? Brands don't get built based on what they say about themselves, right? Brands get built based on what others say about them, whether that be their customers or, in this particular case, third-party reputable media outlets. So it's both the least controllable as well as the most trusted and and arguably the most impactful. Okay, next question here. What exactly is included in website actions in this analysis? I think good question. And just to go a little bit deeper, the two dimensions of consumer behavior we analyzed here were website traffic and then website actions. Website traffic literally just means after someone read the article, they visited the brand's website that was mentioned in the article. They just visited the website. Website actions are the resulting interactions or conversions on that website from that visitor. So those website actions could literally just be visiting different pages on the website, interacting with different content, downloading content, signing up for things, or importantly, website actions can also mean transacting, right? Where they request to be contacted or they actually purchase products and services. So the website traffic is just a visit, and then the website actions are all the subsequent behaviors once they visited the website. Next question here, again, a little bit more methodological. What does high social media engagement mean in the model? Do you have specific numbers of interactions you have considered as high, medium, or low? I'm glad that this question got answered because it reminded me that we didn't define this well enough and we should have. So thank you for asking this question. In the article analysis, every article has either high, medium, or low social media engagement. That is not based on an absolute number. Instead, it is based on how much social media engagement that article received compared to the average social media engagement for an article published on that media outlet. So for example, an article published on Forbes on average, may get 1,000 Twitter shares. If the article we were analyzing had 2,000 Twitter shares, it would be considered to be a high social media engagement. However, if that same article, which got 2,000 Twitter shares, was published on, let's say, the New York Times, which on average gets 10,000 Twitter shares per article, in that case, that article might be considered to be low social media engagement. So it's not an absolute number. It is a relative number, how much social media engagement the article received compared to the average engagement of an article published on that media outlet. Okay. All right, going back in here, this is a question for you, Frank. Any high quality academic certificate programs focused on PR data and analytics for a mid-career professional? Does Medial offer one?
Interesting question. At this point, we don't have certificate programs. We were very close to launching. In fact, it was March of 2020, and I was in San Francisco, and we were at the verge of launching a both on-site / online series of digital programs, little 3-4 course sequences. One of them was going to be exactly in this space about sort of digital public relations and how to measure it. So we don't have that now. There's plenty of stuff out there. One has to be careful because some of it's targeted at the executive level and is very expensive. A lot of it's targeted towards people earlier in the career and they're much less expensive. It depends where one is. I've taught in some of these programs in sort of non-digital worlds to advertising and PR agencies in Chicago and New York. There's a huge need for people who know tactics to get training to learn overall strategic communications. That's the biggest obstacle I see in people's career progression, is that they know tactic after tactic after tactic, which is good, but at some point you got to elevate to a more strategic level of thinking. So I don't have any specific recommendations for where to look for programs, but there is a lot out there, and a lot of it in the online space. And if you don't need the credential, you can get a lot of it at Udemy and Coursera and these kind of places that are very inexpensive.
Good. Okay. And don't hesitate to check out Medial as well if you're looking for more of a.
We have an online master's program that's in marketing communications, which includes some of this material.
Good. Thank you, Frank. Okay, I really like this next question. What if website traffic isn't the top priority of earned media? As a marketing board, we cannot touch point of sale and recognize that our website, while important, is not going to be the driver of influence nor rank as high as other more powerful / influential websites that we may partner with. I really like this question because website traffic and website actions is not always the #1 priority. Some companies, it is everything because it's all about their website engagement and their e-commerce based, or they're trying to drive transactions. But yes, some companies, that's not the priority. Why should they think about PR attribution data? The answer is, website traffic and website actions are only 2 of dozens of different dimensions that you want to incorporate in your PR analysis, right? We've covered a number of these things. Many of the dimensions in our study are in themselves KPIs, right? Sentiment by itself is a KPI, right? The relevance of an article could be a KPI. The reason why the PR attribution data is broadly applicable is someone having read an article and visiting your website is arguably the highest level of engagement and highest level of response that you can measure. And while you may not necessarily say that there's a website-based objective to your communications, when you look at all of your earned media coverage and you can sort and rank and organize all of it based on the articles which have driven the most website traffic, that is going to be a very, very strong signal into which of those articles just generally have created the most engagement and the most arousal with your audience, right? Similarly, social media engagement. That's why social media engagement with articles is such a strong KPI, right? If someone's liking and sharing the article, A, it means they likely read it, and B, they're endorsing it. Well, I could say that it's even a stronger relationship for PR attribution, right? Website traffic coming from an article is one of the strongest endorsements and strongest signs of engagement with that article. Frank, can I put you on the spot here? Any other thoughts why PR attribution is potentially broadly applicable?
Yeah, and that's a really good point about the limitations of the website. And I think people have realized the website is just one piece in the much broader array. And this idea of affiliate and partner digital locations is an important one and a valuable one. And I think people need to understand that and manage that, as I used the word, I think earlier, holistically or comprehensively, as opposed to a webmaster who doesn't know anything about anything else that's going on out there.
Yeah. Okay, this next question, this is a really good question and actually gets to, I think, a pretty big issue in our industries. The question is, my current media monitoring platform, the accuracy of sentiment is not great. Our coverage that is related to COVID is flagged as negative, although the article does not portray our organization or spokespeople as negative, right? Maybe those companies are being mentioned as neutral or positive. The question to us is, how confident are you in the accuracy of your sentiment analysis? I like that you asked this because it gives us an opportunity to actually talk about our sentiment model in a little bit more detail. The sentiment score that each article receives in the Onclusive platform, positive, neutral, or negative, is related to the way that the brand that is mentioned in the article is portrayed in that article. That's why we refer to it in the study as brand article sentiment. And the reason we do that is because 2 reasons. One is, when you're using media monitoring and you're looking at sentiment, that's the important factor, is not was the article overall positive, neutral, or negative, but most importantly, how is my brand portrayed? The second thing is there may not even necessarily be a universal sort of subjective view of an article's overall sentiment, right? It's all going to be in the eye of the reader, in the eye of the beholder. So Onclusive has a technology that actually extracts the individual entities within the article. And the entities are the persons, places, and things named in the article. And our entity extraction then feeds into the sentiment model. And one of those entities is your brand. And we actually created a proprietary model for this using the latest deep learning research out of Silicon Valley. And it has proven to be, through actually a series of tests with human readers, much, much more reliable than the sentiment models that you're probably referring to with other media monitoring platforms that just give you a composite sentiment of the overall article. So that's why entity level sentiment is important. And that's why we are confident that the sentiment we used in this analysis is in fact accurately related to the way that the brand was portrayed in the article. Okay, this is an interesting question and sort of follows on here from something that we were just discussing earlier, which is a while back, The Atlantic did an in-depth market research study using their site media as the source. They found that social media was the biggest predictor of article success. And the gist is, it wasn't the recipient reading it, it was the reshares to their networks who are engaging with the content. And so the question to us is, have you heard of this study, and does this match the surprise about how much social media engagement influences earned media? So just to harken back to this data point earlier, as you saw in our study, social media engagement was by far the most predictive of whether or not an article would drive website traffic, and significantly most predictive in terms of whether or not it would drive website actions. And Frank talked a lot about this, psychological principle that the simple act of, let's say, sharing an article, predisposes you to actually continue to take more action. So this was not a surprise to us. Okay, we are coming up on time. I wish we had a chance to answer the rest of these questions, because we still have quite a few in the queue here. But let's go ahead and just give some final thoughts here. Frank, really great to hear your take on the relationship between media attributes and consumer behavior. Can we get a final thought from you on the topic?
So I think we should look at this PR attribution in the context of this whole digital transformation and everything that's happening with big data and analytics. I'm not going to use the word artificial intelligence because I think people massively misuse that word. But the point is, there's so much going on, and public relations lags advertising, and advertising isn't all that good in terms of the quality of its metrics. But public relations is making great strides with these models, with this natural language processing, and it's going to keep getting better and better. I think it's a fascinating time to be in this space. Again, because I run this satellite program in San Francisco, I'm out there a lot and interact with a lot of these companies. And I think we're going to see continued improvement in the ability of public relations to get beyond producing and distributing content to actually get towards more measuring the outcomes from that content and subsequent behaviors.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Very wise, Frank. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts and best practices based on your rich academic experience at Northwestern University. Thank you all for joining us. We will be distributing the recording to all registrants tomorrow. And in the meantime, you can actually download a complete copy of the research as a white paper by going to this web address. So it's https://onclusive.com/resources/white paper/power-of-earn-media. It is an extensive, in-depth, complete synopsis of the research that you've seen us present here today. And you can take this away, read it at your leisure. And of course, once you've had a chance to read it, digest it, as you have questions about the research, questions about the methodology, if you'd like to continue the dialogue, if you'd like to ping Danielle, if you'd like to ping Frank, once you've researched everything, feel free, of course, to connect with us at info@onclusive.com. And of course, always happy to discuss the Onclusive media monitoring and measurement and insights tools and consultancy. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.